Welcome, one and all, throughout time and space, for this episode of Weebs on the Weekends, the podcast where we break down the anime news highlights of the week and give a retrospective look on an anime that premiered 10 years ago. Today's episode will cover the anime news for the second week of September 2021, as well as our thoughts on whether to resurrect or bury the 2011 anime film Hotarubi no Mori E, aka Into the Forest of Fireflies Light. My name is San Martinez. I'm a part-time weeb, full-time automail mechanic. With me, as always, is my co-host, Jay Johnson, who is also a part-time weeb, but a full-time English language sensei. Now, Jay, I know that for most Americans today, today is a little bit of a touchy subject, and I guess I was wondering, with you not being in America, and I know, like, with Americans being as self-centered as we are, how in your neck of the planet, how are things seen? Is it seen as a normal day? Is it seen as a, oh great, it's another day for Americans to show that they're the only ones that are sad today? Or what's going on with you right now, if you don't mind me asking?
It's a completely oblivious holiday to other cultures. Because again, like when you think about national tragedies, like that word literally, up front is national. So if you're outside those national borders, then it's really nothing really to pay homage or to pay any importance to. And it's funny, like it's 20 years later after the events of, well, we're recording on 9/11 if it isn't obvious, but yeah, it's 20 years later, and it's funny with everything wrapping up in the news recently with the Afghanistan and Taliban going on, as well as, just the whole east coast of the United States kind of getting destroyed by a hurricane. It's kind of a weird time. Throughout this week has been a lot of like stories and documentaries and perspectives coming out. Like, where was the country at the time? A lot of the staff from President George W. Bush came forward to like give like testimonies and say like what was really happening. Because like 20 years is kind of that safe period where it's okay to open the closet and to see like what everyone was thinking at the time, how things were mishandled or properly handled. So how I woke up this morning was with a bunch of my university friends, and we were actually recapping like the news cycle from the day before, the day during, and the day after, just to kind of see what was the language going on at the time in the country. Even we even included a little section of because we're an anime podcast, but we looked at a lot of animation and cartoons that actually premiered the September 8th, which is the Saturday before that date. And it was like Metabots, it was Digimon Tamers, it was Power Ranger Time Force. So that was kind of a way to lighten up the mood after we were doing like this moment of coming together to reminisce. Because like I was in the fourth grade when that happened, so it was like flashbulb memory of being sent home and nothing else until like maybe a couple years later when kids had that significance to reminisce on what happened. So in the part of country or in part of the world that I'm living in, it's just a normal day.
No, like I said, I was just a bit curious, just because I know how public and dramatic the American media can be, and I was just curious on, if others outside of the country had a particular opinion on it, if we were being that dramatic today. And I'm not trying to downplay the tragedies of it. It's just the nature of how Americans are in general, in terms of how we portray a lot of our news that happen. That's why I was just a bit curious. And it was just interesting to me, because the gym that I go to in honor of passed away on 9/11, and for the healthcare workers and the first responders, they did a climbing challenge where, you have like the climbing ladder, and essentially is people trying to climb the entire height of the uh, towers in order to try to bring awareness and to honor the memories of those who passed away. And it was just a bit interesting. I didn't participate in this year. I may want to try and do it next year, just because I've never tried that machine before. And it seemed like a fun thing, but that machine also seems like it sucks. But aside from that, on to more happier news. I'm caught up on my anime. More importantly, my Ita Den deities I've been telling you and a mutual friend about. I'm been having a fun time with that, and I'm excited about it. How about you, Jay? How have you been going with your anime?
Actually, pretty, well enough because, again, we're watching a couple series together, and
Hmm.
with it's kind of been like a very slow summer season. I mean, 2021 has been kind of hype with a lot of, or was like top loaded with a lot of heavy series. And then we'll talk about the fall preview in a couple of weeks. But, summer 2021 is coming to a close. We're basically on episode 10 or episode 9 of most series. And, they have a either 12 episode run or a 24 episode run. So doing pretty well. To Your Eternity wrapped up 2 weeks ago because it was only 20 episodes. So that was like one of the series that I was looking very much forward to. But other than that, it's funny that you think about what series you drop over the course of a year, which I think we'll
Yeah.
probably talk about in our episode of like the best of 2021. But I just had a reminder that Shaman King, the Shaman King
Yes.
reboot, premiered this year, and it was already scheduled for 54 episodes. So even in the fall season, I was like, oh, Shaman King is still going on, right? So I'm
It's like, oh,
actually,
that's neat.
yeah, that's neat. Oh yeah, who's talking about Shaman King? But I've actually been pretty happy with my anime consumption.
Oh, that's good. I'm glad that you reminded me about To Your Eternity because that was one of the animes that I was watching, and I'm a couple of episodes behind on that. I didn't realize that they had wrapped up, so now I can binge the rest of it and be alone in my feels. But aside from that, I think it's probably time that we get into the news. Are you ready for the news, or you have some other stuff that you want to divulge or discuss?
Oh no, I'm perfectly ready for some news because we have a movie to talk about that is my choosing. So yeah, let's get to the news, Sam. What's the news?
All right, so to the audience that is listening to us, remember time codes, descriptions, box. Let's go. We're doing the news right now, and just want to cater. I think this news caters a little bit to both of us here, Jay. Uh, just talking about how the Fist of the North Star has been getting a stage musical adaptation. And it's just kind of funny because I didn't think that something like this would be musical appropriate. No, not necessarily appropriate. That's not the right word. I guess I didn't think that it would transition into musicals. And it's just also very interesting too because the one of the actors for uh the cast is uh, uh his name is Yusuke Onuki. He was basically Daisuke Kanbei in the Millionaire Detective Balance Unlimited, and he's going to be participating in this play. And I sort of wanted your thoughts on it. I know that you were a big fan of plays. I didn't know what you thought about musicals, and I wanted to pick your brain on what you thought about this particular franchise becoming a musical.
Yeah, from the standpoint of the distinctions between like stage plays and musicals, musicals are always the ones that are downplayed somewhat in the anime to live action translations because musicals are really hard, a little bit harder to write than stage plays because stage plays can just be the anime script just with like some more physical comedy or depending on like drama that they want to add depending on who's writing the play. But when it comes to musicals, you really have to tap into, I guess, the tone of the series, and specifically with Fist of the North Star, like it's so like being raised like the original series ran in the 1980s. So like what we grew up knowing was more of the meme version of this. Like You're Already Dead is kind of like overplayed, and like it appears in like Shonen Jump or the was that the Shonen Jump video game? What was that called? Jump Force. Jump
Yeah,
Force.
Jump Force. I'm sorry. Yeah, Jump Force.
Yeah, and he appears there, but Keisuke is kind of
You
an
mean?
outdated.
Oh no, Kenshiro. Kenshiro.
Kenshiro. Oh yes,
Yep.
Kenshiro. Yeah, Kenshiro is kind of like a relic of the past, and it's kind of funny to see that he is being resurrected nowadays. Because I think the last time Fist of North Star was anywhere in the anime manga industry was like in 2016, and that was that was like 5 years ago now. But I'm kind of glad that musicals are like maybe taking more obscure properties, because again, it's always one of those ways of introducing new audiences to like old properties. So as far as that, I'm interested in it. But if I was saying that this is a mismatch, like you said, Sam, I believe it's a complete like why do this kind of thing. So like so I'm like interested to see like what is going to be the preview, because right now we have the cast listing as well as like the profiles of what the actors are going to look like in their like stage gear. But for right now, there's no like trailer, there's no PV, there's really no nothing to really grab onto besides like the bare bones of that it's a musical.
Yeah, it's as you said, it's just so much of a mismatch because of the story material. We basically have Fight Club in Mad Max's universe, and we're basically having them sing, and so it's like a whole bunch of tough guys singing, and it's just going to be very interesting. But talking about the promotional videos, they were saying that the production has been on hold. However, the world premiere would be in Tokyo Nisei Theater in December, before playing in other regions of Japan in January, and after which they're going to be going to tour in China. So I don't know if this is going to be like any of the other works that we had mentioned before, where they're going to have a virtual streaming that goes along with it. But once it gets closer to December, maybe if it comes back up in the news, we can see where it's going to go. But it seems like for the music, they have pretty heavy hitters. With, I guess, like they have this one guy, Frank Hill Wildhorn, who worked on Jekyll and Hyde with Whitney Houston in Where Do Broken Hearts Go, and also worked on Death Note the musical. So it will be very interesting moving forward with that. And the next bit of news that I want to talk about is mainly Orient. We talked a little bit about this before we began the podcast, and essentially they had dropped a promotional video, a teaser for the work that's going to be happening, and it's slated to air in January 2022. And we have what are your thoughts on the promotional video?
It is a thing of like, oh, this is the mangaka that did Magi. Kind of,
Mhm.
it's like one of those things. Like her distinct character design is kind of eye catching, because she's only done Magi, she's done this, and she did like her premiere, or what do you call that, freshman work
Yeah.
back in early 2000s. But yeah, Magi ran from like 2009 to 2017, so it has like a good base of fandom around it. So I'm expecting like the whole Magi crowd is going to transfer over, because it's been long enough for it to like kind of wane a little bit, but in one of those ways of like making fans thirsty for more. So that's probably what the production studio is I not I but ACGT.
Yep.
ACGT,
ACGT.
which is a very odd studio that they do mostly co-productions. Like I kind of first caught glimpse of their work with the weird anime from like 2 years ago. I Love My Mom and her two-hit combo, whatever that long light novel title is. But they mostly work with J Staff Studios, because
Hmm.
JC Staff, and they're a giant monolith of a studio. Um, and like JC Staff does Fairy Tale, so it's kind of like one of those studios. It's like they have
Oh,
like
okay.
a not bland style, but they do a lot of, I guess, journeyman kind of works, in which they're just like turning out products after products after products. So I'm glad that the studio is kind of stepping out on their own, because this seems to be one of the one few properties that they're solely responsible for. So I'm looking forward to it on that basis. But like it looks interesting enough, because it's like one of those stories of the Sengoku time period, and demons are in charge, which is like kind of I guess standard for the supernatural genre at the time. But samurais are like taboo, and dude is going to try to change the world with his flaming sword. So it kind of hits all the points. It looks good, and yeah, for it to be going up against like Attack on Titan final season course 2, I'm very interested to see how it actually stands up.
Oh no, you're definitely right. And just to talk a little bit about the joint works, because you had mentioned before they worked with JC staff, and one work that they worked with JC staff on was Toro Kagaru no Accelerator, right? Scientific Accelerator. So, and I remember like that series, it had some pretty good fight scenes. And as far as works that they've done by themselves, they've done all of the Freezing franchise, and it seems like they also did Initial D, the fourth stage. I haven't seen enough of the Freezing franchise to see what. Oh, they also did. It seems Fist of the North Star. At least 3 episodes of it. So it's more of a segue than one. Now that I'm looking at it, but I would say because when I saw the promo video, like the action wasn't as fluid as with A1 Pictures, and that was one thing that the Magi franchise. I don't know why they call it Magi because when I see it, like I would think like Magi, like with the three Magi, but with Magi, the action was so fluid that it kept up with the story and how it was so unique and it was so different. I would say like with Orient, at least like with the action that it had produced in the promo video, it's I would say it's a little bit different, but it's not off-putting, and it would definitely be interesting to see how that's going to be moving forward. Like you said, especially going against Attack on Titan. So on to the next bit of news that we have. Just to readdress a franchise that we've mentioned before. Chainsaw Man on their official Twitter account had released information that they will be getting a novel adaptation called Chainsaw Man Buddy Stories, which will ship in Japan on November 4th. And essentially, it will pen three. I'm trying to think what the word is. Not episodic. It's sort of like the Twilight Zone. I forget what the word is, Jay, where they're not necessarily related to each other, but essentially three standalone stories that has the theme of Buddy, which is going to follow the two characters, Power and Denji. Denji being the main character, mainly following them during their time as their partners, essentially just building up their buddy drama, so to speak. And one thing too, looking in this work, it made me realize that the author was the same author for Fire Punch, which I didn't realize. But Jay, after having this series and for almost a year, and with the anime on the horizon, what do you think about this new novel that's being dropped beforehand?
Yeah, like you said, it is the mangaka that did Fire Punch. His name is Fujimoto. Fujimoto, yeah. So yeah, so and I'm very much shy when it comes to the Chainsaw Man manga because of how graphic is. It's like one of those, those berserk kind of horror. It's not really horror. It's just one of those ways of like surreal, disturbing images that you don't want to ever see. It's one of those nightmarish landscapes. Like if you woke up in a page of Chainsaw Man, you're not going to have a fun time. And we
Oh
talked
no,
about
yeah.
a little bit of the Studio Mappa adaptation that's coming up soon, and how many heavy hitters that production has under its belt right now. But it's really interesting because we talked about a little bit before, I think in the previous couple of weeks, of like the mixed media kind of way that animes have been kind of branching out with literature, with comic books. Oh, we talked about that with the Cowboy Bebop
Yeah.
Netflix special series. But yeah, the one thing that really interests me about this story is that this is coming in between the reemergence of Chainsaw Man as a part two, because the part one did wrap up with only 11 volumes, where it started back in 2018 and just finished in 2020. with 11 volumes, and now they're going on to a part two. But this novel is going to kind of be the bridge between those two. And it's really interesting that they're not really giving Chainsaw Man a break. And I think that's like in the best interest for the fandom, where the anime is going to come out, then part two is going to come out, and then we'll see where it unravels from there. But I think the most interesting part of this is that it's being penned by, can I say their name right? It's like Satoku. Satoku is or I should say their last name is Haishi Kawa. Haishikawa also wrote for the manga Hell's Paradise, which kind of captures the same feel of Chainsaw Man. So they did go to, the writer or author that can kind of capture the same horrific vibes. Because when you read something versus see something, it's like it triggers something differently in your brain. So when you're reading something, you want to be scared as equally as viewing something in the visual medium. So I think they actually did pretty well picking out writer for the novel. So I'm looking forward to it because I'm way more excited to read a horror novel versus reading a horror manga.
That's interesting that you say that because you could argue that reading a horror novel is worse because you're essentially using your own imagination to recreate the gory and horrific scene.
Exactly. No, no. Yeah, perfect, perfect. Yeah, because like I could scare myself perfectly fine, but if someone is getting into my brain or psyche to scare me, that's what horror is. It's giving control over someone and feeling helpless in a situation. So I like reading horror because I'm at the torment of my own mind versus someone tormenting my own mind.
But no, I'm glad that you did mention Hashikawa's history because I didn't realize that they brought in a heavy hitter for the novel adaptation. So thank you for that. I really do appreciate that. And I guess like when you had mentioned the second part, I was under the impression that it was all that all of Chainsaw Man was already completed. So the second part is just the second half of the manga series, or is that manga work that has yet to be written?
Yeah, it's very weird because again, this is something that you rarely see in mangas, and I can't actually think of anything off the top of my head that has done it before. But Chainsaw Man has technically concluded because they are listing it as arcs and like part one and part two, but maybe something as what they're doing with Bleach is that maybe Bleach will come back with an after story or something. But like the first part for Chainsaw Man is the public security arc, and then now the second part is going to be the school arc. Yeah, but technically Chainsaw Man is finished, so whatever this part two is a continuation.
Oh, so I guess it's a little bit like JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, where there is a part one where you follow somebody, and okay, so it's a little bit like that then. All right, now I get you. Now I get you. All right, so along to a little bit of news that caters to me a little bit. Just wanted to sort of like pick your brain on this too. But the Common Writer website had revealed new images on an upcoming anime series that's going to be the sequel to its Common Writer franchise known as Common Writer W. And it's going to be penned called Futo Pai. And the series director is directed by the person who did Excel World with the person who directed Black Clover, and it's just very interesting because the series is supposed to serve as a sequel to that franchise, and it's supposed to basically help hype up the uh, franchise known as Kamen Rider, their 50th anniversary that's supposed to be coming up next year. And this sequel series, Futo Pai, is supposed to be slated to come in the summer of 2022. And so, Jay, I want to say like this is the first time that I've seen something like the Kamen Rider franchise or like a Super Sentai franchise be given an anime adaptation or an anime continuation.
It is a weird thing that, well, it's next year technically, but we did have a previous news story that you brought up about the Sentai restaurant in Ikebukuro going up. So it does make sense again. Like we're in news we follow trends or we follow the pathway of certain news stories. So like we've been talking about the Gundam and Sunrise efforts to kind of bring Gundam back into the spotlight. So it seems right that we're talking about Common Writer now, since next year we'll talk about the 50th anniversary. So that does make an interesting point for next year's discussion. Maybe we should cover a Common Writer series, kind of branch out from anime. But yeah, with this being set for the summer of 2022, that is like a lot of hype around it. And I think it is one of those franchises that does demand a faithful adaptation of its series because, again, Kamen Rider has always been in the outskirts of the anime community, even though it plays into the Super Sentai genre so well. And just thinking about it again out loud is that it seems like a perfect match of mixed media where once people get a taste of it, they're going to go back to the older series and say, oh my gosh, this is what I've been missing out on. And then it's going to propel more anime adaptations in the future.
I'm a little conflicted because I had watched the series Kamen Rider W in its entirety, and it was done fairly well. The completion of the series, it felt satisfying, and I didn't think that there needed to be a sequel series to it. But with as popular as it was, I can see them trying to at least hype up the anniversary with doing something like that. But I would think that they would do a live action adaptation, not necessarily an animation for it. There's definitely a lot more action that you can do with the medium of anime, and you would see it even in Common Rider shows today that they have to CGI a lot of action sequences, but they like the Super Sentai shows they do a lot of good choreography with the people that are there. So it's one of those things where it can go very well or it can, be a mismatch for the wrong reason. But from the stills, it seems like they have picked a pretty good studio to pick it up. And until we see a trailer for it, I can't really. It's supposed to be Studio Kai, which is known for Uma Musami Pretty Derby. I'm not familiar with that series.
It's a it's a Monster Girl series where they're horses and they're doing derby racing.
So maybe their derby racing scenes are really good, and I know like with the franchise they have it's called Common Rider because the main protagonist rides a motorcycle of some kind, so hopefully we can get some good action sequences on motorcycles. And that's all we have for there. On to the next bit of news. This one sort of caters to you. We'll have a second to last news for you here, Jay. We have word of a new anime known as Sakugan. It was given an anime promo and it is slated to premiere on Tokyo MX and MBS on October 7th. And essentially, the premise of this anime is that it's so far into the future, people now live in it's sort of like post-apocalyptic where they live in this quote unquote cramped labyrinth underground, and essentially you follow this 9-year old with her father as they're working as miners, and essentially you follow them on an adventure where they run into a mysterious creature and they end up trying to figure out the different mysteries within the labyrinth. And as the father takes on a job that's more lucrative but dangerous, and along the way the little girl wants to figure out what happens to her mother. And I just brought this to your attention mainly because it feels very much like Into the Abyss, and I wanted to sort of get your thoughts on it after seeing the promo and looking at the synopsis.
Yeah, you're completely right because I thought it was going to be a Gorlan Gone kind of
Mm-hmm.
build up because again the setup to Gurren Lagann is that they're digging underground, and not to go into that, but yeah, I think the better comparison is Made in Abyss. It's just the whole father and daughter going on, not going on an adventure, even though it says that. It's more of like, given that it's Studio Satellite, not Satellite, Satellite? No, maybe it is Satellite, but they are the co-production studio that did Somali and the Forest Spirit. So
Okay.
I have many vibes like, oh, they're just going to do that, but just underground. But because they usually do co-productions, this is probably more going to be in the vein of Log Horizon because they're responsible for the Log Horizon, and I'm very excited for that reason because Log Horizon is one of those OG isekai. Even though this is not an isekai, but it does show a good understanding of world building, and that's kind of seems to be the point of this. Like, what happened to the world? Why are people underground? What is this mysterious creature? And what is going to be that dynamic? And I think we talked recently with Usagi Drop, the episode on Usagi Drop, about how that father and daughter dynamic can work, which works well. And it plays to a lot of different genres, not genres, but demographics, that it can be for little kids, it can be for the older adults, because it's one way for the father, one way for the daughter. And of course, I love the children in danger kind of motif, so the Made in Abyss comparison is apt. And it's interesting that this was actually supposed to premiere last year, so this was actually on my radar before. So I'm finally glad that this is kind of the last holdout for all the uh, COVID kind of like delays. So it's set to
Mm.
premiere in October, and as well as this is based off on a novel. So given that it has that kind of original source material, I'm looking forward to it.
Nice. I didn't realize that it was off of a novel. I thought it was like maybe a visual novel, but like the you had mentioned the father daughter duo, and hopefully with this one it would like the father daughter duo that we see, it's a biological tie that ties them, because in that franchise, from what I've been exposed to, it doesn't seem like they have that, right, where if it's a father daughter duo, it's always a surrogate father, not necessarily the blood relative. So it would be very interesting if they do go that route, to just to see how that dynamic plays out, or if they're going to go a different route. And it seems like they have a lot of people on here. They have one person that does the character designs, did the designs for Dimension W, which I really enjoy. And it seems like, as you said, Studio No Borders. They have a mechanical designer on here that worked on one of the Macross series. So if there's going to be mechs, or if there's going to be mechanical devices, they're going to have some decent looking stuff. So that's going to be very, very interesting. Now, on to the last bit of news, and this will be a segue into your story, or into your movie pick here, Jay. But essentially, the anime project Kijin Gentosho fantasy novel will now be getting an anime adaptation, or an anime film of some kind. And it was just very interesting when I came across this, because this has that similar romantic motif that's going on in Fireflies that we're talking about today. And I sort of wanted to get your thoughts on it. And let's see. Yeah, sort of wanted to get your thoughts on it. If you saw any parallels, or I'm just completely off base with this, and I need to stop, and we need to go on to the movie.
It is like, again, it's one of those things of like, it's like romance stories and supernatural kind of just go, it's not a hand in hand thing, but it's always one of those things of like, what does a supernatural element add to a very intimate personal story? And like, love is like one of those things that people are just attracted to when it comes to like, what happens to love when you add like immortality or a disease or like demons and angels. Like, how does that change the human condition or affection? So yeah, it's a good parallel like for our last news story, but it is so bare bones right now that I do want to keep that in mind, that we really don't know much. There's the visuals of it and like the premise and some of the key figures behind it. But for right now, it's one of those stories that we're definitely going to have to keep our eye on.
Oh, definitely. Like as you said, just to give the audience a bit of exposure to the bare bones minimum, it's supposed to take place in an Edo period where a shrine maiden runs into a young man who claims to be a demon who is from the far future, where he's supposed to defeat a demon that's from the far future, and essentially he's just chilling there at the shrine until the demon shows up, and it's sort of interesting how they're pairing this romance with the supernatural, and essentially like they're doing it also in location too, which is done very heavily in the movie, as we'll talk about a little bit later. I just found that very interesting. I guess it's more or less how the writer or the author is sort of using Japan's own love for their history and mixing it with romance as well. So as you said, like once this gets more fleshed out, we can talk about it more in depth there. And that's all that I have with the news. I know it was a little bit long, but we can go on to the main topic for today, which is Hotarubi no Mori E, which is Into the Forest of the Firefly's Light. And again, time description. We're going to be shifting gears, and we're going to let Jay take it from here.
All right, so it's very odd. Like you said, the English translation, and that is, one of those free translations. Is like technically correct, but it sounds so odd. And
Yes.
to add the little light part at the end, like makes it sound like so jarring. But like how I translated it was either by the light of the firefly forest, because like that More is um, forest, but her name, the main character, Hotori means firefly, but when you add that B on it, like Hanabi, it's
Mm-hmm.
light. Hanabi means fireworks, but light meaning B. Sorry, just I got real into the kanji of it because I was like, I hate this translation. I hate the translated title. No, reading it off of my anime list, yeah.
I'm glad that you did tell me, that you went into the literal meanings of the word, so like it sort of gives me a better idea. And I'm actually kind of surprised that in this movie we didn't get a lot of fireflies, just them playing off of puns in terms of her name, right? Because you get that in a lot of anime works. For instance, Penguin Drum, one of the characters' name is Ringo, which literally means apple, and you see her with apples. Like her favorite type of curry is having a curry that has a secret ingredient that has something to do with apple jam. Like something punny and on like that. And you would think that in a romance work, you would have something. A girl is literally named like Firefly, but like there was nothing dealing with fireflies.
Yeah, it's like so like they do the summer festival at the towards the end of the. This is only 40 minutes, so it's technically classified as a short film. But yeah, you have the
Mm-hmm.
summer festival, which in Japan, fireflies are abundant. Same thing like with cicadas. Like you always hear background sounds or background designs, including cicadas. But yeah, the lack of fireflies is kind of disturbing. So maybe a missed opportunity, or they just didn't vibe with that kind of aesthetic. But we are talking about this anime film for we kind of do like 9 episodes of anime series and then a anime film. Earlier we talked about from Poppy Hill, or from atop Poppy Hill, or from Poppy Hill, yeah. And earlier and before that we talked about the Ghost in the Shell movie that came out this year. But I wanted to talk about this movie because it is by the same mangaka responsible for Natsumi's Book of Friends, which we had a previous episode on, and that mangaka is Yuki Midorikawa. And again, this is a story that she's taking very, I guess, personal, her personal experience into effect. So I really like when mangakas kind of do that. They use like a fantasy story or a supernatural story to tell a real human story that they've gone through. It has that more personal connection with the audience. But as always, when we start off with our movie reviews, we go through a couple of categories where we start out with our weeb opinion, which is the thing that we want to soapbox about this movie, like the thing you love, something you hated the most. It usually is built inside of some kind of hyperbole. But Sam, do you have a strong weeb opinion about this movie?
I do. Are you sure you want to start out with me, or do you want to go out first?
Mine is kind of bland because mine is just that with the 45 minutes, this shows that the three episode test that we do has so much more validity than I originally thought, because shorthand storytelling is such a art form that I think that because we're so inundated with media nowadays, we kind of forget. But given that this
Yeah.
was back in 2011, where anime films or like are feature length, meaning 90 minutes, that they're telling this story in such a short amount of time that you can see inside the framework of these 40 minutes that there could be a potential 13 episode series out of it. But it tells such a compact, concise story with good written characters. The budget wasn't really clear. I couldn't really find anything on this budget, given that it's a short film being done in house by Studio Brainbase, which we'll talk about in the studio profile.
Mhm.
But it's so well done in how compact the story is and how they model the whole progress of the story and the idea that this is a memory for the main lead to reminisce about her experience with this mountain spirit, which we'll talk about again in the synopsis a little bit down the line. But yeah, my weed opinion is like this film shows that the three episode test is just a case that needs to be applied to every anime. So if you can't set up your characters, if you can't set up your world, you can't set up your themes in 40 minutes like this movie did, then what are you really doing? And your anime should fail because, writing a good story can be hard, but if you do a lot of the most simplest things, like take maybe like a human approach to your main characters, like what is this one thing that makes this character likable or entertaining, or what makes this world interesting, is there one feature in it that will generate interest in your story, then do it. But yeah, that's my kind of slight weeb opinion, but we kind of say that with every single episode that we do, that the three episode test has validity in it, but this movie definitely proves that rule to be true.
I'm glad that you start off with that positive because, and as you said, it is very very true. Where you can have a very long and complicated story. However, if you can't at least set up the premise, set up the characters that you're going to be following, and give something for the listeners or for the audience to grab a hold of so that they can get on that wild ride with you, then as what you said earlier, it's like, what are you doing? You're basically just throwing stuff against the wall and seeing if they stick. Now, my weeb opinion is that this romance with the death touch is done better than the X-Men, and we didn't need a 40-minute discount version.
Did you say X-Men? Which X-Men series are you talking about?
No, just any of them in general, because we, for the most part, we would get like we see this type of romance with Rogue, with I'm sorry, with ah, not Rouge, but with Rogue and Gambit, right? Essentially, she can't touch people. Where if she touches them, she'll either uh, kill them with prolonged touches, or she just gets a copy of their powers, right? So she essentially can't touch people, but she makes it work. And there's also another X-Men character. I can't remember his name, but his power is if he touches you, you literally die. And he too was having that same issues, but he was able to overcome it and have a romance with another X-Men character because she is essentially living Mercury. So they found out his power is that he, like, if he touches any living biological thing, then they die. But if it's something that's inorganic, say like metal or something like that, then there's nothing, then nothing happens, right? And we also have a new anime that came out this year. I think it was the Duke of Death, or Teasing Mr. Duke of Death, where essentially the Duke of Death is have or this kid was cursed with, if he touches anybody, they're going to die, and essentially him and his servants that he is very close to, it's playing along with their romance and their feelings too. I feel as though that even though that this story was short and concise, the way that they portrayed the romance, it was just done very poorly, because we don't you get a sense of, I don't know if I want to talk about my gripes without talking about the synopsis first. Do you want to go into that, or am I okay with speaking my thoughts on particulars for the story?
Yeah, we can follow up with the plot synopsis in a little bit.
Hmm.
We can jump to that. I want to do the studio profile first
Okay,
because there's
okay,
a
yeah.
lot of things to talk about since we're such big fans of Studio Brainbase or
Brainbase. Yeah, we
Brainspace.
let's go ahead and let's do the studio profile, and I can talk about my weeb opinion a little bit later. Then it's just
Yeah.
that with my complaints, I have to go into particulars, and I don't want to jump around.
Exactly. Yeah. So with the studio, this is Studio Brainsbase, and it's interesting that they were founded back in 1996, and they only have well, they don't only have, but it's very odd that they have four films, which is this film, The Boy Who Saw the Wind, Dance with Devils, and oddly enough, they are actually responsible for the compilation film that's coming out next year for Penguin Drum,
Oh
which
yeah,
is
yeah,
called
yeah.
Recycle Penguin Drum or Recycle of the Penguin Drum. So this is a studio that has done one of your favorites, Bokuno. Why do I always say that name wrong?
Bakano.
Bakano. Like I've said it wrong every single time I bring it up. Bakano. They also are responsible for Durara. They are responsible for a host of other animes. Like their top ranked ones is like My Little Monster, the two that I just mentioned, as
Oh,
well as My Teen Romantic Comedy, which I think wrapped up earlier this year. I forgot, but
I'm also looking at it right now. They also did Inspector, which the Japanese translation is Kyoko Suri, which came out, I believe it was
last year.
last year.
It was
Yeah,
last year, yeah. As well
and
as they're responsible for
mhm,
To Your Infinity or To Your
mhm.
Eternity, which, if I had to right now declare my anime of the year, it's definitely in contention for that.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
So we'll talk about that a little bit more later. And oddly enough, it's another brain based production. But this is
They
a
also
studio.
did Blood Lad.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they've done
yeah.
47 TV series in total, so
Hmm.
it's like they're. Oh, so this is the fun fact about Studio Brainbase is that they've since opening with their first anime in 2002, Dai Gundar, which if you saw Guy Dundar, you would know which mecha series that is because it kind of has an iconic mech design. But Guy Gundar. But ever since 2002, they've released an anime every single year except for 2004. So it's very odd that
2004. Wait, I see. Pluster World. Oh no, no, that's 2003. Never mind. Go on. Continue.
okay, yeah. So it's odd that for a studio that doesn't really, doesn't gather much acclaim. Well, that's not true. They do gather acclaim, but I guess they don't gather a lot of um, notoriety, I guess is the word,
Mhm.
because they're like just turning out all these like not quality series or above the radar, but like they just kind of slip by. Because like who knew that they were responsible for Two Year Affinity until I really looked into it. But yeah, it's a very odd studio for a studio that we both love. Yeah, so they seem like a very diverse studio given that they have done over 47 animes, 15 OVAs, and like something I think you brought up. Well, with oh my gosh, can I say this name right? It's not Bokuno.
Bakano.
Bakano has some really great fight choreography. Because I haven't seen
Dude,
it yet. I'm one of those weebs that's a blank space in my filmography. But
I'm surprised you haven't seen it yet as much as you like Durarara.
yeah,
But
yeah. So like,
yeah.
do you say that they have a good sense of choreography and fighting in that
Oh
show?
my goodness, dude! In Bakuno, like because I was thinking like after mentioning Bloodlight, like those sequences were good, but dude, no, Bakuno is tens and leagues above it just in terms of choreography and all the quick movements, the fluidity. It's done very very well. There's also a scene where essentially this guy he's killing people in a white suit and just the colors and how they play around with it, they're done very very well. I'm actually kind of surprised that they haven't done more on the action side of things because they can do it if they wanted to.
Yeah,
They can give Mappa a run for its money.
yeah. Inspector is kind of their like I guess a case example of how they've kind of evolved over time. Because Inspector came out last year, and it kind of has those sweet choreography touchstones like you've been talking about. But let's close up the studio talk about right there, and then let's move on at least into the voice acting profile before we get into the plot synopsis and ruin this movie that apparently we have two distinct different opinions on. But Sam, you got the profile of the voice actors?
Yes, I do. For the actor that voiced Jin, which is the main male protagonist, who is the one with the fox mask, the actor is Koki Uchiyama. He is affiliated with the Himawari Theater Group. He was Roxas in Kingdom Hearts. He was Soul Evans in Soul Eater. He was also Benager Lynx in Gundam Unicorn and Yuri in Yuri on Ice. He had won Best Voice Actor in the Tokyo Anime Award Festival for 2015, and I didn't realize that they brought in such a heavy hitter for that role. I didn't realize that this guy had done so much. So it's just very very interesting seeing that they had somebody like that for the main role, especially for as little as they had him talk. It was just very very interesting.
Oh yeah, just to add on to his like enormous work, his list of works, he's also Tomura Shigaraki from My Hero Academia, so he can get into that very
He
kind of
has that
creepy.
wide range, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. So yeah, heavy hitter is an understatement.
For the next person I have is the character is Hotaru Takegawa. The actress for this character is Ayane Sakura. She is with she's affiliated with the group known as I'm Enterprise. She is also from My Hero Academia. She's Uraraka Ochaka, and she is Tsubaki Sawabi in Your Lie in April. She's also Gabby Braun in Attack on Titan. She is like looking at her. She's one of the more younger voice actors who's coming up into the field. However, she had won the Best Supporting Actress award at the Seiyu Awards in 2018. So it's very interesting seeing her sort of come up and at least like juxtaposed or at least paralleled to the previous actor that we saw. She is like with her stuff that she's done, it seems like she's going to be just as big as he was. So it's kind of cool seeing a voice actor sort of grow in her group, and I'm assuming that with the published with the company she's with, I'm Enterprise, she's probably going to be doing some other stuff too, not just sticking to voice work moving forward. But do you know anything else that she's a part of, Jay?
Yeah, if like just to say like how impressive her range is and her performance or portrayal of Gabby Braun in Attack on Titan final season. There are just some scenes of just pure hatred, and if you've
Yes.
seen her profile picture, she looks like the most sweetest person, but like all the danger she can convey in her vocal performance for Gabby is like really shocking. But the thing that like really like what you said was true about like the kind of reverse, like a seasoned veteran and a newbie or a newcomer into it. That 2011 was essentially her breakout year because she had this. She was in Onohana. She was in Wandering Sun. She was in Princess Jellyfish. And then her career has just been building up, building up. So
Hmm.
it's actually kind of late in her, not late in her career, but for her to have this body of work for 7 years just to be awarded with the best supporting voice actor award in like the Japan like circuit is like
Hmm.
kind of shocking that she hasn't been recognized sooner. So I'm very much want to keep an eye on her career because like if this is like only after 7 years that she's getting awarded as best supporting role for voice acting with the Seiyu Awards, then she's probably going to be a heavy hitter in a couple of years, or a heavier hitter in a couple of years.
Oh yeah, like I can see her trying to punch above her weight sometime soon. I feel like some new role in a movie or something is just going to springboard her forward if My Hero is not doing that enough for her right now. So for the next actor or sort of the next character that I have, I wasn't able to find as much information on him as I did on the others, but the character that was portrayed is Hotaru's uncle, which is Takegawa. They didn't have his first name there for some reason, but the actor who played him is Senpachi Suji. He is he plays Yamada in Golden Kamui. He is Popkun in Naruto Shippuden. He played Sergiet in Log Horizon. He's also Jacob in Spice and Wolf. So it seems like his roles are a bit more toned down and he's more of a supporting role. Again, I wasn't able to find much more information on this particular actor. Do you have any inputs? Because you said that you're a fan of Log Horizon, so do you know his character, how that character is portrayed versus the uncle that we see in this short film?
No, it's very much that he's very much suited for again the supporting role because again it's not a big cast. There's probably only 7 speaking roles in the whole 40 minutes. Like again, it's essentially just a two-person talking about the stage play, but it is essentially a stage play. Is that it's just
Yeah.
this their focus on their relationship and coming through multiple years. So for the uncle and some other voice actors, they're very much supports. They don't need to be a standout heavy hitters like we just talked to for the two main leads. But that does lead us into the plot synapses a little bit well. So I want to get into that and get into your disdain and hatred for love. And with
Yes.
this film, it is a we're again celebrating its 10-year anniversary, which is oddly close to the actual date, which I don't think we do a good enough job actually celebrating anime on their 10-year anniversary. But this released in theaters back on September 17th, 2011, with a 45-minute runtime. As you said, the title is, oh, let me try to not mess this up, but Hotarubi no Mori E, or Into the Firefly Forest Light, is a,
Your favorite translation.
yeah, yeah. And we talked about the studio. We talked about the mangaka that was responsible for the original one-shot manga that it's based off of, which again is a very controlled way of telling a 40-minute story. But it's based off of a one-shot manga back in 2002. So it's had pretty much a long time to fester in the space that Natsumi Book of Friends kind of opened for it. So that's kind of why this came about and why I wanted to talk about it, as well as this being a direction by Takuhiro Mori, who is the director of Durara, as well as, oh, let me try to say this again,
Bakano.
Bakano, Bak. It's a CC sound, not a K sound, but Bakano, as well as some other major properties like Princess Jellyfish
Mhm.
from Studio Brainbase, because he's like an in studio director essentially, basically only doing work for that one studio. But the story of this is that it centers on two main leads: a human girl named Hotaru, which translates to Firefly, and a masked forest spirit named Jin. Jin? Gin.
Gin.
Jin, yeah.
Gene or Gene?
Yeah, right?
Either one.
Is it the alcohol or the anyways, yeah. It
Or
is
is it
a
Snake Eyes from Bleach?
exactly, yeah, that's who I was thinking about. Yeah, never trust people that keep their eyes closed. But it is a story that focuses on the relationships over the years as she ages, and that Geen just stays the same. They do address that he ages slowly, but he ages like in reverse dog years, essentially. And it is in genre of romance, supernatural, and shojo, and with a rating of G for everyone, and is available nowhere, no how, and is available on Blu-ray actually for $84 because um, it is hard.
Can it
It is
really be that good if
impossible.
you can only get it on Blu-ray, Jay?
It is so hard that, and I think that's what was going to be my other weeb opinion is that how are you going to gatekeep this behind a Blu-ray release only when it's a 45-minute production and it has so much acclaim behind it? It won the My Nichi Film Award as well as the Jury Film Prize in Glasgow, Scotland. It has a rating
Really?
on Miami list of 8.34. Uh, it is ranked at 190, as well as has an IMDb score of 7.9. So it's like, why? Why is it so expensive? I don't know. It's 45 minutes. It's literally for every minute you're watching it, you're spending $2 essentially. That's such a weird conversion because on the Blu-ray, like there's some in-depth discussion about the filmmaking process, the cinematography. So they do have that making of special attached to it. But for how Studio Brainbase kind of animates this, it's very plain. It's very flat colors. The focus is on the background art, where the forest is kind of a character by itself because that's where most of the quote unquote action, the story is taking place. So the forest feels very alive, but there's not a lot of many moving parts. There's no actions. Even in the forest, there's no animals. There's no much life besides the two of them. And again, that's part of the focus of the theme that it's a memory that she's reliving, and that's what it vibes with until like the very end, where there's like a crowded festival, summer festival. Why do you hate the story?
It could have been done so much better. So you said that what you said earlier, short stories are done wonderfully well, and they can be translated into the medium very well as well. We've seen this with the movie known as Secret Window. That is a short story by Stephen King, and it was adapted into a movie with Johnny Depp in it. It was done so good, and we also have seen romances like this where one person is afflicted. It's mainly the male character, which I don't know why, but for some reason, it seems like the male character is always afflicted with some sort of physical debilitation, such as You Before Me, where basically Emily Clark is acting as a caretaker for somebody who is paraplegic, and there's a romance that blooms there. We even see this in Benjamin Button, where Brad Pitt is basically ages backwards and having to deal with that and what it means for him to connect to different people. So I do recognize when a romance is done fairly well. And I like how with this story, because essentially their interaction with each other is essentially a summer romance that never dies, right? Whereas, and watching this, it sort of reminds me in my summers where I would go to my grandmother's house and I get to spend time with my cousins, things like that, get to go on different trips. So it sort of helped me reminisce that nature. However, with the budding of the romance, it never really gave me a any believable reason why that would happen. Because Jin's character is bland. He's doesn't really do anything. He's just sort of there. Or we're not really given any instances where we see him do anything outside of his character aside from hitting Hotarubi from lunging at him and trying to give him a hug because I think I'm sorry. You did go over the synopsis, didn't you, or no?
No, yeah, we do it. Yeah.
Okay, because I just wanted to make sure that we had recapped it before I kept on going. But like he's under that curse, right? Whereas if he's touched by a human person, that he essentially would die, right? And he keeps hitting her every time she tries to lunge at him and hug him because she's like a kid and she forgets immediately. So, but like aside from their very first interaction where he helps her because she had gotten lost and he helps her get out of the forest, we just see them walking throughout the woods. We don't really get any characterization of Jin, why he's interesting. It's mainly just her going to be with him because she thinks he's lonely, but we don't get to see him talk. We don't get to see him expressing any ideas, any wants, or any desires, or what he wants to do, or anything else like that. He's just sort of there. So when she gets old enough to start having feelings, it just feels forced. I'm not given any reasons like why she would do that. Like it seems like the only reason why she falls in love with him is because of like that rule, like if she touches him he dies. It's like that's the only reason why she is interested in him at all, is because if she touches him he dies. Like it's like that's sort of like that one rule where it's like, or sort of like that one thing where it's like if you tell the kids like you can't have a cookie right before dinner, that makes them want to have the cookie even more because they can't have it. So, and having that as a basis for romance is it's just dumb. It's like, are you loving the person for who they are, or are you loving them just because you're told you're not supposed to love them? If it's the latter, then it's not romance. Anyways, it's just you having a problem with the rules. You're not really loving the person for the person, and that's sort of my gripes about it. That they could have showed a proper romance rather than, I mean, I was at first I was mad because he is considerably older. The argument could be said that he essentially groomed her to like him, but she's only there for like certain parts of the year, and his personality is so bland that, and like the way that he treats her, it's so indifferent. It's not like he is trying to shape her up or anything else like that. So as I said, like his character is just so bland, and it's crazy to me that they have such a good voice actor to play him. It's it, that's all I have for now. Um, so I'm going to get off my soapbox for a moment, and sorry if it seems like I'm just shitting on it, but maybe you can help me understand, Jay, like why do you like it? Like because you mentioned that it's a. I'm assuming from your opinion that it's a great romance. Why is it such a great romance?
Well, that's the whole point of Weeb Opinions. To start it out front is that you soapbox about it because again,
Yeah.
like the emotional point of a movie is to develop, or at least to develop in the audience like a visceral response to like that short of a runtime. And again, that's
Mm-hmm.
the point of, I guess, my Weeb opinion of that 3 episode test is that it falls into that category of short form storytelling. And not to say that this is a great romance, it's a romance from the standpoint of a child. And again,
Okay.
that's not, doesn't make it dumb, it makes it childish. And I think that's what I was vibing with from a storytelling standpoint of why
Mm-hmm.
it works, because it's from her perspective. And again, the whole idea of it being a memory, given that
Mm-hmm.
at the very end of it, you have a festival where, sorry, you know from the very beginning that it's going to end in tragedy. And again, what is the point of putting the supernatural tag on top of the romance tag because of that built-in over dramatic, over dramatizing a situation. But specifically to this is that it is one of the key factors in like vampire stories. Like, how do you put two people inside of a romance that have so vast a difference of an age gap or a vast age gap? And you can kind of attribute that to like the cultural difference of Japanese culture. And I really hate the term like when when anyone puts into quotes like, "Oh, this is Americanness" or "this is Japaneseness." It's just
Yeah.
being blunt about things that make cultures different from each other. And like even when you mentioned the whole hitting children on the top of their heads with a stick, that's actually a Shinto practice because the crown of the head is the representation or the top chakra, the highest point that you are to God in Shintoism.
Okay.
So there's a lot of subtle things to the storytelling that goes on because even though Jin's kind of, it's not even milk toast, it's just not present. Because again, like that's how children associate affection. They glob onto one facet of that person or that thing and then connects that to like strong emotions. And again, the idea of grooming is not so much problematic in the show or in the series or in the film
Hmm.
because that doesn't happen until she's approaching his technical physical age, and because he doesn't really show signs of too much maturity or too much wisdom or agedness or experience, it does feel like the movie isn't going too far into that creepy aspect that it could have leaned into if they mishandled it. So I appreciate it for the simplicity of a child's love story because
Hmm.
that's really hard to capture without getting too creepy, to getting into that, oh, just being groomed to get into a relationship. But there's so many small features of them just spending time together. It's more of a meditation, I guess, than an actual love story. So it's kind of hard for me to say it's a good romance. It's more of a lesson for her to learn, essentially. And it's not going to hit you hard like Onohana's ending, which you could bawl your eyes out of. But it is a sad ending because the reason why he dies is because he's grown attached to the human world and he reaches out during a spirit festival to what he thinks is a spirit, but is actually human that snuck into the festival. So it's just like tragedy happens, kid. The love of your life disappears or anything can
Yeah.
happen. So it's again, it's like one of those tall tales or morality stories that I vibe with a little bit more than a romance. So that's what I got out of it. So for those reasons, I'm going to give it a resurrect. That for the 40 minutes that it takes. Now, if it was a 30 episode series, like they could expand a little bit more. Like you said, they would probably fix
Hmm.
his character to give him a little bit backstory because you don't really know why he's a spirit. You don't know why he has a red shirt, how he can change his clothes, and all these other things about him. Like, again, he's not milquetoast; he's just a blank character. So, with a 13 episode series, you would probably get more into his backstory and give him actually a characterization or an arc to go through while she's just going through the process of growing up. So for the 40-minute runtime and for all the positives, I'm going to say it's a resurrect. But how about you?
It's Reberry because, as I said, it's good and it's simple, but they could have done stuff a lot better. Like I guess in the as you said, a lot of the times that we see them being together, it's a bit like a meditation, but they could have used one of those instances to where we could have some characterization of Jin to give Hatorubi Hatoru a reason to keep coming back, like why she ends up liking his character even more, right? because even when you're having like those times of meditation, there are times when you know you like you don't always have to be doing stuff with your friends to enjoy time with them, but you know that there are little gems you can have when you can give them a nugget of wisdom, or they can give you a nugget of wisdom, and it sort of deepens your relationship. We didn't really get any of that. So they could have done that, and she gave him a scarf, and we saw him at least like be able to make contact with her by tying clothing with his wrist into her wrist. There is no reason that homie could not have gotten a pair of gloves and held her hand and, at least protect himself that way, right? I mean, we see that with Rogue. She has gloves. She can touch people like that. Even the death dude that I talked about in X-Men, he can do that. It seems like, I don't know, they just didn't think about it. It might have slipped their mind, but like we've seen them do stuff like that in the movie, right? Where they would they would carry the same piece of log to quote unquote hold hands, or tie clothing to each other. It's like I'm sure she has gloves, or she has seen gloves. Why didn't she get him a pair of gloves? That way he wouldn't have died, and they can like embrace. As you said, it's a little bit of like that child wonder, and I feel like that if they had done a little bit more work on his character, it would have been more satisfying for me of a romance story. So I would rebury it for the sake of a rewrite. And that was our thoughts on Hotarubi no Mori E. A strong resurrect from Jay for its simplistic nature in how it did that very beautifully, and a strong rebury for me for the same exact reasons that Jay wants to resurrect it. And that's all that we have with this episode. Are there any other thoughts that you want to go over, Jay?
Because this is our film episode, that means we are going on break for a couple of weeks, and we're going to come back in the fall, which is just 3 weeks from now, or the first week of October, to talk about our film preview, or not film preview, but our fall preview for anime that will be premiering later this year. So that is basically it.
And with that being said, Jace, we will be coming back with you guys bigger, better, stronger. But for now, I will close things off by asking Jay, what have you got for us today?
Yeah, so I've been neglecting my duties as a responsible teacher, so I'm going to teach you some vocabulary. So the word of today is firefly, which we know the Japanese of it now is hotori. So for the English, it is a noun, singular, firefly, plural, fireflies. Definition: a soft-bodied beetle related to the glowworm, the winged male and the flightless female, of which both have luminous organs. The light is chiefly produced in flashes and typically functions as a signal between the sexes.